Learn the most advanced recruiting techniques. Land the most desirable talent. Launch your company towards massive success. This is the Higher Power Radio Show with Rick Girard.
Routine hiring. For some of us, a routine is a negative connotation. That same old boring routine, you hear that all the time. But what does it really mean? So it means that we have the wrong routines, and evolving routine is what is vital for growth. So best practices should always be tested and improved upon. Today's quote: celebrate life in all its glory. Challenge yourself to let routine sing and the new dance. Any idea who said that, Dr. I?
Yes, I think that was Maximilian de Generis, right? The Holy Roman Emperor.
You are spot on, which
right.
I found he was never crowned Pope.
Isn't that interesting? And it's good. He talks about routine and singing, and that's about rhythm, and that's pretty good. So,
I love it.
Yeah.
I'm Rick Girard, and welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show. Our mission is to help entrepreneurs and startup executives avoid costly hiring mistakes. We identify a specific problem and provide proven tactical solutions to help your company win the right hire. We do this by sharing insights from top-performing rebel entrepreneurs, disruptors, and industry experts like our guest today, Dr. Anhil Iskovich. He's the president of Inflexion and also a physician, a man of many, many talents. Now, conventional wisdom suggests that the best way to navigate our noisy new world is to accept change, open up to novelty, go with the flow, embrace the relentless pelting of content minute by minute. But Dr. I is here to say that's not the best way to journey through our lives. So, in fact, it may go against our very nature of how we're hardwired. The subject of his new book is Routinology, the art and science of routine. And, of course, the crux of the book is that humans not only require structure, but we thrive in it. So I say this all the time. Nobody believes me. They all want to be loosey-goosey. So from the womb to the tomb, we create and recreate numerous dynamic time bubbles, offering us meaning, fulfillment, and purpose. So he's excited to show us how implementing routine over one's life can lead to better health, joy, and fulfillment, and which is what makes him the perfect guest for today's topic. Dr. Iskovich, welcome to the Higher Power Radio Show.
Thank you. And you're welcome to say Dr. I, because everybody kind of mangles my name a little bit that way.
Did I mangle it?
Yeah, no, you did pretty well. You did pretty well. So thank you.
I practiced it all morning. Because usually I botch up everybody's name, so I'm trying to get much better at that.
No, that's fine. That's why Dr. I has kind of been what we've been using to talk about the book and a little bit to get the story out.
Awesome. All right, today we're going to cover the science of a routine. We're going to talk about the benefits and the negatives of having a routine, and then how to build a strong routine into your hiring practice. So let's start out with the obvious question, Dr. I. Why is a routine... what is a routine and why is it important?
Well, in pure definition, it's about really regularity. It's about time. It's what we do on a regular basis. And it's also a little bit about where we do this. I always like to talk about the time bubble, the bubble being a stable and familiar environment, the routine being time.
Sure.
And I noticed when I was studying centenarians, people that were over 100 years old, that there were two common things about them. And one of them was that they did things very regularly, very routine. And they lived in an actual very stable environment. But what they did varied quite a bit.
Yeah.
And this is kind of where this all started. And I began to recognize that this was the case for high performers, that it was the case for care of the young. And this is where I started to look at the science of routine and regularity and why it is that we're wired that way.
Well, because it seems to me like if you're we just fall into it, right? Aren't routines something we just fall into that we do on a daily basis? Aren't we creatures of habit by nature?
Right. And, even habit is kind of a little different term because that's kind of an automated behavior that you do. And it might be routine, regular, or it might not be routine. But the answer is really a little bit behind the science, the science of homeostasis of all living beings. And that's kind of keeping a balance, an equilibrium, keeping a balance. And then there's the sciences of how we work with stress, the endocrine system in our body. I don't want to get too technical, but I'm glad to do so if you need me to. And also really about circadian rhythms. If you think about it, we wake up every morning and we go to sleep every day.
So for us that don't know, what exactly are circadian rhythms? Because, to some of us, that seems like kind of a unicorn type thing.
It just yes, and again, it's just about the way our bodies actually work. There's been Nobel Prize work that's actually been done in showing how this actually happens at a molecular level. But there's a reason we kind of tend to wake up at the same time over and over again, and there's a reason we get sleepy at a certain time.
Well, that's part of a routine, right?
And it is, and that's kind of how we're wired.
Your body naturally falls into routine.
Exactly, and that's what we need to begin to recognize, that there are times of the day that, and if you start looking at the biology, that we're actually more alert, more productive. There are times of the day that we're a little bit down. And this may be very important, and I found that to be the case while I was a CEO of a fairly large company that did staffing management and the sort. So I love an opportunity when you get a chance to talk a little bit about that.
I know, and I'm excited to have you because I can pick your brain for a while. All right, so so what's the clear difference then between the habit and the routine, right? Your body is more prone to routines, and the habits are kind of they're layered on top.
Right. I mean, so a routine is something that happens at a regular time.
Got it.
Again, that's why I talk about the time bubble, and it happens when we're at our best in stable and familiar environments.
Got it.
And this is kind of goes back to humankind and how we survive and the sort. A habit is a form of behavior. It might be drinking alcohol if it has a certain addictive quality, or it might be kind of scratching your head, or certain automated behaviors that you do. If you do them regularly, it becomes a habit. Like people have a regular habit, let's say, of brushing their teeth before they go to bed, or waking up and deciding to do some form of make your bed or the sort. That's the behavior that you do.
Habits.
Right.
Okay, so I just want to distinguish between those two. So a routine is more something your body is regulated toward.
Right.
So
correct.
Okay, got it.
And it can be anything, because the main thing is that routines can have our own unique behavior. We can decide what to do. We can decide whether we're going to make our bed in the morning or drink coffee first.
Sure.
We can actually then decide how we're going to go ahead with the rest of our day, how we're going to move through our business work during a day. And these are unique, but there's a certain regularity and rhythm to these.
So does a habit become a routine?
A habit can become a routine. It can be something that you do regularly, but habits are usually thought about as being very automated, things you don't have to think about, things that actually work in a different little part of your brain than that prefrontal part of your brain that you're thinking about. And some people believe that good habits, automated habits, don't make you give you freer mind to do other things because you do them, so to speak, automatically.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about kind of how that falls into play. Developing these routines for your company, right? So this is more of a body thing, but are routines developed within organizations?
Well, organizations and businesses are really just about us, right?
Yeah.
Us all kind of working together for some common goal. In the case of business, for some form of profitability or something of that sort. And I think one good example of that I recognized early on was that sometimes the people that worked, our team members, our staff, really weren't really at their best at certain times of day. It began to make me think about, when are we at our best? And if you kind of look at science and you look at how your cortisol levels and what happens once you've woken up, it becomes a really engaging time when you're really alert and can do a lot of things that are what we call vigilant tasks, things that require lots of expertise, lots of analysis, things that might be Excel spreadsheets. In the case of recruiters, of course, I was involved in a physician staffing agency and the sort that can really source or do detailed work, do statistics, and that's a really great time first in the morning to do that. And as the day goes on, it starts to change.
Yeah, most definitely. So you're looking at this, so our habits create our routines, right? From a leadership perspective, we should be leading people based on what those routines should be around the different timeframes?
Well, here's the main point about leadership. I think what leadership needs to do is create a really stable and familiar environment.
Sure.
Something that has stability. Any company or group, any managers in the HR or recruiting side that are doing this need to have a certain stability with their teams. So stability and a familiarity of your environment is what leaders should do. And then I believe leaders need to recognize when people are most productive. And that tends to happen more so in the early morning. There's a great time for more engagement from noon to other times.
Okay, we don't want to give that up yet because we're going to run through.
All right. All right.
Let's not give the time frames. But I think what I want to make sure that our audience understands, and I want to make sure that I grasp it too, is that really we're looking at two different things. I mean, habits are developed by routine, by whatever your body is telling you to do.
A habit,
but leaders should be aware of people's routines so that they can develop their habits to manage more effectively during those time frames.
That would be good. Again, a habit is simply what you do at a regular basis. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And if it's a true habit versus something you have to think about doing, it's a little more automated. But you've got that correct.
Okay. So, because I think of habits like a routine. So that's where I'm trying to just get the correlation and make sure that there's an understanding there, right?
Right.
Because the goal of this show is to help entrepreneurs and hiring managers really be able to effectively hire the right people. So some of our staff some of our listening audiences are recruiters and that sort of thing, but most of them tend to be entrepreneurs. So one of the things we want to make sure that they're doing it, and a lot of them are first-time entrepreneurs. They don't really know. They're just trial by fire trying to figure it out. So if we can help them get them on the right routine, then, hey, they got that much of an advantage over everybody else in trying to get things going. All right, you're listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. I'm Rick Girard. For our podcast listeners, we're going to take a quick educational moment from our sponsors. Hey, book me to come speak at your next corporate event. You can find out how at rickgirard.com. Our guest today is Dr. Anhil Iskovich. He is the president of Inflexion, and we're talking about routines. All right, so there's kind of two different routines here, right? You're talking about there's a personal routine, which is you as an individual has, and then, of course, there's business routines, right?
Correct.
So how do we let's talk about the personal routine. What do you think is the best way in which an individual can maximize their performance through their routines?
So the first piece is that, routines in themselves, like even making your bed in the morning or making that cup of coffee, or in a business sense, using this next half hour to every half hour at 9 o'clock to look for new hires that you might have in your company.
Sure.
That in itself, once you complete that task, it gives you meaning and purpose on its own. And this is there's psychology behind it, but I think it's pretty evident that that's an important aspect of meaning and purpose, and this kind of begins to drive you and give you a sense of accomplishment in itself. Personally, that becomes the case. Now, what you do at different times of the day can vary, and sometimes I like to talk about, Bill Sanger was a CEO of a Fortune 500 company I had the pleasure to work with, and he did a particular behavior at a particular time. This was his routine. From about 3:15 to 4:15, he shut off all of the data. He took all the social media, all the data, closed the room, and let his mind wander. It's not quite the same as
meditation.
It is,
in a way.
In a way, it's a little different than meditation.
Sure.
But he let his mind wander, and he let that happen really, so that he could either make important decisions or develop a little bit of clarity, without really all of the clutter, that kind of sensory clutter that comes to our lives today, which is part of what I really speak about, because
the
we're
bombardment from everybody else's agenda.
Yeah, we're
right?
being interrupted. We're being disrupted. We could talk about how technology does that with, let's say, our phones or what we do today. And, I head a technology company, an artificial intelligence company that I'm the chair of right now. So I know a little bit about how that may be helpful or could be disruptive. But the point being, there's kind of one really good behavior that you might be able to really do, whether you're a business leader or you're just an individual, you're a manager, a director. Take a little bit of time
And just reset your mind.
And reset your mind. And you might be able to make some really clear decisions too.
So why would that be better than meditating?
It's not necessarily better than meditating. Okay. I think that meditation has a little bit of kind of exercise and knowledge that you need to bring to it.
Sure.
Determine kind of what type of meditation you're going to do. Determine what kind of mantras you might have. And you need a little bit of practice to get better at it. I think shutting things off and just letting your mind wander, that might be a little easier to do. That's the only reason. Yeah. That's the only reason.
I mean, if you don't want to spend the time trying to learn how to meditate, right? It's probably the most effective way. So is there a time when that's the best time to do that?
Well, a lot
you said he does it like around 3 or?
Well, it depends. You know, in personal routines, a lot of people tend to meditate once or twice a day. And often that works best either in the morning or a little bit later in the day. And I think as a day has gone through and lots have come to you, whether it's what candidates, how to source them, how to decide which ones are the priority that you're going to try to determine and work. You've got only so much time, and you have to focus on it. Maybe that's a really good time to make that type of decision. Usually somewhere around 3 or 4 o'clock. There's a time that I'll speak to a little bit as whenever you'd like me to, about 3 o'clock, and what happens to our blood sugar levels and our cortisol, and everybody's grabbing Starbucks and the sort. So there's a lot going on there. That's not a bad time to take a little time off sometimes.
So for busy executives, shutting down and resetting your brain on a daily basis probably makes you more productive.
I believe it truly does, and it helps you make better decisions and really have a moment to think through them, so you're not getting pelted by everything that you do in the day of business and in your personal life.
Yeah, especially if you're trying to hire people, because that can get really confusing and overwhelming, especially when you're a smaller company.
Right. You need to sit for a moment and think about the human aspects, let's say, of that interview that you just did.
Yeah.
The ability to kind of think about it. Today, there's kind of the connection between in the business world now. They're looking at artificial intelligence and genomics, for example, big data as the intersection where technology meets humanity. And so some people will say, well, we can get a pretty good protocol to decide who we're going to hire or how we're going to do it.
But they act as if the choice is actually in their hands. And what's strangely enough, the choice is in the candidate's hands right now. Okay. The people who they're trying to recruit are the shot callers.
Exactly.
So it's great that you can use all these tools, and I have these conversations with people all the time. Yeah, you can invest a lot of money in it, but still, you have to do something to get that person to want to work for you.
That's right.
And that's that human connection.
It is, and the ability to, when you're in that interview or however you're doing it, on both sides, to be able to connect.
Yeah.
You know, I used to tell our recruiters, and this is what the good ones really did. They really became engaged. They became engaged in that candidate, interested in their lives, interested in what they do. And they were the most successful. But you have to be able to read people to engage.
To me, the most successful recruiters that I've seen or coached or mentored or been part of are the ones that care about that other person.
That's absolutely right.
Yep.
And if you, some would say, well, you know, I'd ask a question like, what do you know about this person's life? I see all this data. They've got a great resume.
5 years of
and
this
could you tell me a little bit about them? And they hadn't really engaged in a way to really learn what they were about. And people who care about people then can often make a connection. And really what you want is you want a good fit. You don't just want to plug the hole. And to do that, you need that human characteristic.
Yeah, it's like when you have a hole in your boat, you don't want to fill it with more water. You want to plug it with something substantial, right?
Exactly.
So that's what ends up happening a lot of times. Well, that person brings the skills to the table, but are they a cultural fit? That's where that reflection time, I think, that you talk about is so invaluable. If you take that 30 minutes to sit and think about it and ask yourself, why should I hire this person? Maybe, does this person really fit with my culture and what we're trying to accomplish here? Exactly. And if it's somebody who just brings his skills, hire a contractor.
No, I totally. And I think what we have to be careful about today, and this becomes to be philosophical questions with my interest in philosophy, of course, but is really this concept of techmanity. this intersection where we meet.
Techmanity.
Yeah, and that's a name in business when they're really looking at certain areas like medical science and investing in those areas, or in genomics or in artificial intelligence. And
Sure.
and I know a lot of people may have not heard that, but I've recently just saw a nice Merrill Lynch brief that talked about all the companies that are in these kind of areas. But I think what your listeners have to be careful to is that every piece of technology is not necessarily valuable. And every
So
piece
true.
of technology cannot take over some of the skills that we, as I like to speak about, are wired for. Wired to develop our own unique routines or our business routines. We're not going to be able to change our wiring overnight.
No. And when it comes to the end of the day, you need to make decisions based on evidence that you're gathering from that person, not based on what a computer program tells you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, the person you're trying to hire is not going to use a computer program to run AI against your company
No.
to figure out whether or not you're a
Right.
good fit for them, right?
Right, and that's why I speak about routines. And when you talk about the circadian rhythm, the rhythm of the day, that there are better times to engage.
All right, let's talk
Yeah.
about that. So
Yeah.
run me through what should somebody be doing on a daily basis? Like, where are they going to get the most productivity?
Well, if you
So
if you
said-
follow the science of your body,
Yeah.
and if you think about it a little bit, you kind of start understanding that. You reflect on yourself that this is kind of how it goes. It can shift a little bit for different people. Some people are larks, they get up early. Some people are owls, so the circadian rhythm kind of moves, and how your cortisol and melatonin and all this stuff happens. But in the morning, like I was saying early, often from like 8 to 10, again, these hours can vary a little bit, is a great time to do very vigilant, task-oriented work. Things that require computation, for example, or
Writing.
significant thought. Yeah, writing can be the case if you're doing, let's say, a brochure that you're going to be sending out, or some form of e-brochure, something of that sort, things of that sort. And that's a really great time to do that. Around 10 o'clock becomes a great time for people to engage, not just yourself, but also the candidates, where
That's
you can
when you
see
go get
people
some
at
more
their
coffee.
best. Yeah,
Yeah.
and people.
Water cooler time.
It's kind of water cooler time around 10. There's a little bit of energy there that's maybe required, but this is a great time to engage. We're often at our best, especially in interactions.
So maybe if you're setting up
yeah.
client meetings and that sort of thing, that's usually a good time to go engage.
Right. If you're going to be person to person, in my case, I really loved even first interviews, trying to engage a candidate. I loved doing it by Skype or having some video sense, so there was a little bit of visual and sensory contact in that regard. But those are great times to have a meeting. They kind of can extend through lunch and out through afterwards at 1 o'clock and the sort. So those are really good times to do that type
So like
of work.
10 to 1-ish, that's kind of your best engagement
And often,
time.
yes, sometimes
Right.
I'm sure that recruiters and small entrepreneurs are meeting someone that's going to be one of their smaller part of their team. They have lunch with them,
Sure.
right? That's a great time to engage, breaking bread, so to speak. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, so after lunch, what happens?
Well, again, after lunch is not a bad time. There's a little bit of a drop, what they call the postprandial tide, that happens in your body.
The postprandial tide.
Yeah,
All
and you'll
right.
see this. That post means after eating tide, which is like the tide's going
Sure.
away. But pretty quickly you do recover by 1 o'clock or the sort. Depends if you're an early eater or later eater. And you have some good productivity time. But when it starts to become close to 3 o'clock, the mid-afternoon, to the later afternoon,
Red Bull
our
time.
Red Bull time, and
coffee
it's
time.
interesting. And when you look at this, this is fairly. You see how social cultures play this out. In England they have tea.
Yeah.
Okay, high tea at 3 o'clock.
So this is like your least productive time.
It is. It
so
is.
this is when you're mentioned is a good time to meditate or reflect or do those things your brain jump
the
started
brain
again.
is telling you sleep, eat, or have sex, actually, but you can't do that on the job, and that's what
Well, some people do.
Yeah, and in Spanish cultures, of course, they often do sleep, but this is a great time and meditation may come a little bit after a little bit of energy in the sort, but it is a great time to do that. And I also use this time to engage with my teams as a leader. It was a time that you could have a great meeting, bring a little bit of energy, foods and the sort, and let people talk about innovation. Talk
That's
about
when
new
all
things.
The crazy ideas can
right.
come out.
The crazy ideas can come out. Great time to do that. If you're sitting there tasking your people to do Excel spreadsheets, produce reports, write brochures
Do
at
not
3
do it
o'clock,
at 3
you are not
o'clock.
going to be productive.
Absolutely.
In fact, you could just, if as some people have done, you could just say, let's forget 3 o'clock. Go home, everybody, and we'll talk again a little bit at 7 or 8 o'clock and have a virtual world. So yeah.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
All right, man, we are just about out of time for today's show. Angel, thanks so much for your time investment today, and I want to welcome you to the Higher Power Radio community. Now, you have a new book coming out, a lot of exciting things happening. What's the best way in which people can reach you?
Well, we have a webpage called angeliskovich.com, but
Okay.
the book and the term routineology.
All right,
okay,
we'll have a link in our show notes.
Appreciate that. And I'm on Facebook as Dr. I Routineology, and also on Instagram and the sort. So we're talking a little bit about little quips about the book and things that might be of interest to people.
Awesome. Well, thanks to our listening audience for tuning in to this week's episode of Higher Power. A quick thanks to our team, our engineer, Paul Roberts, our producers, Andrea Ballin, Shanti Ryle, and Ayla Gerard. If you're listening to the podcast, please subscribe, review, and share. We love your feedback, so keep sending it to us. You can join the Higher Power Radio community at Higher, that's H-I-R-E, Power, P-O-W-E-R, radio, radio.com, or you can drop me an email at rick@stridesearch.com. I have a few upcoming webinars next week and the following weeks teaching career wounds methodology. So I'd love to have you guys join me. Tune in next week. Our guest is going to be Marianella Gombosev. She is the CEO of Evoke Neuroscience. I'm Rick Gerard, your host, and you have been listening to the Higher Power Radio Show. Aloha.
Thank you for listening to Higher Power with Rick Gerard on OC Talk Radio.